Hello, I'm Carolyn Holzman, and this is Confessions of an SEO. Usually I try to keep my weekly confessions to 15 minutes, give or take. For Season 6, expect this to be a little more SEO-ish than in previous years. A little more technical, some content formats, AI citations, the whole shebang. So you ready? Welcome to Season 6, Episode 8 of Confessions of an SEO. I'm calling it The Code is More Like Guidelines Than Actual Rules. Last week we had a bot chat, a Google bot chat. Not so much concerning the visceral online reaction to the news that Google had reduced the amount of content on a crawl that Googlebot crawls, but instead focused on how well our pages are optimized to load as quickly as possible, because we want to take full advantage of those 4 or 5 seconds the JavaScript window is open. So it was a bit technical, for an SEO podcast, but these days the responsibility for an SEO to understand some more of the technical basis for crawling and indexing, I don't think is optional any longer. Okay, now things are getting serious with Vizzex. Now you can get in early on this. There's an AI visibility mastery course starting next month on March 5th. If you want to know more about that, go to Vizex.ai. That's Vizzex.ai. And on the homepage, there's a little button. Click on that says Watch the Replay. Hope to see you there. It's 12 months of walking participants through the nitty-gritty of getting started with Vizzex and a whole lot more. We're going to be sharing some more advanced uses of this knowledge, like how to expand the topical radius of your site. Like, boom, people. Anyway, the article writing process continues on the mystical listicle. It will be forthcoming, and I'm hoping this week. Meanwhile, under the heading of What's Old is New Again, today we're going to talk about parameters and their close cousin, first cousin actually, the Canonical. So as I was thinking this over, I thought it might be fun to do a little confessions trivia game. And if I did, it would be full of questions like, what confessions episode is and will be the only interview format ever done on this show? And then what confessions episode is the only rebroadcast episode ever in 5 years? Turns out this is really a trick question, because the answer to both of these is actually the same episode. Originally broadcast in 2022, Season 2, Episode 15 was rebroadcast in Season 4, Episode 33. Now, the title of it is called Wow, It's All Blue Socks, the Google URL Parameter Tool. Now, it is an interview I did with Ted Kubitis, and we were discussing the retirement of the Google URL Parameter Tool. Well, for those unfamiliar with what a parameter is, much less the Google URL Parameter Tool, it would be my pleasure to acquaint you and perhaps even reacquaint you with it. So a URL parameter is like a special instruction added to the end of a URL, or people call that technically a web address, to tell the website server exactly what to show, like filtering a search, or, sometimes we use it to track where a click came from. Now, the thing about parameters, they always start with a question mark, and there's some text that comes at the end. Now, it's meant to only communicate with the server. So the way this works is if you're looking for blue socks, the instruction at the tail end of that URL simply instructs the server to navigate you so you can see all the blue socks on that site. We use this all the time as consumers when we're shopping. But what I want to discuss today is the impact that a URL parameter can have on pages from an SEO point of view. And there's a couple of them. And I will say, not all good. Okay? So they can accidentally create duplicate content. Parameters will often create multiple URLs that lead to the same or incredibly similar content on the same domain. Now, this can confuse crawlers because it will make it difficult for a search engine to identify the canonical version. And everybody reads that and they go like, oh yeah, because that's going to always be negative. And I'm going to interject. I'm going to say in the short term, data shows that it can affect things positively, but inevitably there are negatives that show up in the data. So they can also impact page speed because some of these parameters trigger more dynamic content, and that has to be sort of processed in the moment, and that can increase page loading times. So slowing page rendering speed, which if you listened to last week's episode, we talked about the limited time the rendering bots have where that window is open for them to capture everything. And then from a sort of more calculating the link equity. So parameters can impact link equity. So let's say the number of backlinks, if different URLs with those parameters have been linked from external sources. And, if you've built backlinks to those parameter links, and let's face it, there was a time when we kind of all did that. This typically weakens the SEO performance of the main page as the equity is not consolidated back to the main URL. And here's my favorite. Search engine indexing. Pages with URLs can get indexed and appear in search results. Last, but definitely not least, you've heard about crawl efficiency. So the efficiency of the Google bots, the ones that you want to know about your content. When there are numerous parameter-generated URLs, such as that navigation I described to find blue socks, this will increase the number of pages that a search engine needs to crawl. Now, this will consume a site's crawl budget. Googlebot doesn't come and camp out every day on your site and crawl every single one of your pages, right? It's resource allocation. So what can happen is that with these navigations to find those blue socks, if there's a lot of them, that bot will stay there and crawl as long as it can, and then it's used up all its crawl budget. And so that means some of your important pages that are not about blue socks, getting them crawled less frequently or perhaps not at all. And that's what the interview with Ted was all about. So the story starts like this. Once upon a time, there was a nifty little tool buried in Search Console, a tool that was necessary because in the early years of Googlebot, it couldn't tell the difference between a main page URL, the canonical, if you will, and that same URL with all the parameters tacked on the back of it. And that same URL with tons of parameters tagged on the back end of it, initially to provide the navigation for users. I guess I want to explain it this way. You know how what happens in crowds when someone you don't know looks like they are really trying to talk to you. And within a moment, you realize they were trying to talk to the person next to you. Okay? Now, a Googlebot does not have that awareness. So it just crawled and it crawled and it crawled. All of these faceted URLs that were literally leading it back to the same page. And then, whoops, time is up. I'll see you later. And off it goes to another site. So the problem was much of a site didn't get crawled because of all this miscommunication. This little tool was generated in a way to inject the more precise interpretation of all those parameters. Like, ignore all of this. This is the main URL. And basically, they could crawl that page and then move on to the next one. And they weren't distracted by all these parameters because it was a real problem. And apparently, this tool worked great as long as it lived. And then in April 2022, Google announced, this tool shall be no more. If you haven't listened to the interview, you can find the link in the description, or you can just Google Confessions of an SEO Podcast parameter tool. So in our time together, Ted and I Bennett gaming out what could possibly go wrong. So 4 years later, turns out quite a lot. First off, it wasn't long after that spring cleaning of that tool that we started to see Google updating its developer docs on the Canonical rules. And much like in the Pirates of the Caribbean, the rules of the Canonical are like the rules of the pirate code, more like guidelines. Back in April 2022, when the plug was pulled on the parameter tool, Gary Elias comforted us with this, saying, going forward, you don't need to do anything to specify the function of the URL parameters on your site. Google crawlers will learn how to deal with the URL parameters automatically. Then, helpful content rolls out twice in 2022 with not much apparent impact. And then in September 2023, they rolled out one tsunami of a helpful content update, and which left devastation in its wake for many, many, many sites. And in 2024, helpful content was judged that it had worked so well that Google rolled it into the core algorithm and ran it in March 2024 and reduced the index by slightly over 40%. And then 3 more times before the end of the year. That was in August, November, and December. And about halfway through that August core update, these kinds of things started to show up. This August 26th, Gary continues to warn about URL parameter issues. He said this can impede search engines, reducing their efficiency in crawling and indexing sites properly. And then October 24th, 2024, guidelines were updated. Proper parameter formatting ensures better crawling efficiency and can help common indexing issues that affect search performance. And then December 2024, Google formalizes decades-old faceted navigation guidelines, saying the challenge with faceted navigation lies in the mathematics of combinations. Each additional filter option multiplies the potential URLs a search engine might need to crawl. And now, this month, Google crawl team files bugs against WordPress plugins. Quote, the problem with action parameters is that each one creates what appears to be a new URL by adding text like add to cart equals true. Parameters can stack, doubling or tripling the crawlable URL space on a site, and ended with some comforting advice to web owners. The crawl waste is often baked into the plugin layer, and that creates a real bind for websites with e-commerce plugins. Your crawl problems may not be your fault, but they're still your responsibility to manage. So let's recap. In 4 years, we went from going forward, you don't need to do anything because Google crawlers will learn how to deal with URL parameters on their own, to your crawl problems may not be your fault, but they're still your responsibility to manage. Oh, the irony. And I think in the original episode, we clearly recognized that the first vertical that might be rocked once the tool was gone was indeed e-commerce shopping sites with all their faceted navigation to help their customers find what they need. And when I said that there might not have been much observed impact on those first 2 helpful content updates, this week I found a disturbing article from March 8th, 2023. And this is a guy named Edward, who apparently is a kind of Shopify expert, specifically in the SEO challenges of Shopify. The title was Weird Shopify SEO Issue, Millions of Index Pages. And it was a story of a guy who reached out to him with a weird Shopify issue. In this guy's Search Console showed over 1 million index pages and 4.5 million non-index pages. And the kicker was, this guy only had about 200 products in reality. So I'm guessing now that's not so much a weird Shopify issue, but we could see it as the warning salvo alarm of what was going to come as a result of deliberately dismantling the parameter tool. So there's more to come. I'll be publishing the article and sharing it on LinkedIn and Facebook. And if you aren't connected to me in either place, You will cry if you miss it. That's it for me this week. Get in early on Vizzex. It's the world's first helpful content analysis tool. The difference isn't more content, it's connected content. And this is accomplished through a horizontal analysis of your blog content. I also believe this will aid agencies in reinvigorating their content services for their customers, for the sites that they manage. Now, if you want to get in on an insane offer, join me and Kim Albee in The Truth About AI Visibility. It starts March 5th. You just go to the homepage, Vizzex, Vizzex.ai. And now more than ever, AI makes the indexation of your content into Google and Bing essential. So don't leave it to chance. Check out Indexilla, which is now the exclusive provider of the crawl or no crawl indexation reports. And Indexilla is my indexing tool. You can find it at indexzilla.io. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the SERPs.